to the members. And this thing's dead solid perfect. You're getting your documents, okay? And they're probably paying your legal fees at the same time. Dissolution, covers dissolution. Now, here's the beautiful thing about this law. Just about every one of those statutes, they allow the association to pass or to put more restrictive things in place. So the covenants, and I guess to some degree the bylaws, if you don't like the statutory requirement of quorum, you can lower it, or maybe you can raise it. All right? If you don't like the proxy procedures, you can change it. So at the end of each one of these statutes, it says, unless the governing documents dictate differently. All right? Let the association manage themselves, okay? They're doing a pretty good job of it. We don't have a lot of litigation in Mississippi. We do have the Mississippi Condominium Act. This governs condominiums separately from HOAs. Obviously, condominiums are different animals. They're different animals in title. They're defined differently. You know, they're all in one building with different owners, or the improvement, whatever that may be on the property. It's basically a building with different owners, and so it dictates how you convey these things. I know we've all closed condos. They're becoming more and more popular in our state. So it dictates conveyance. It obviously dictates enforcement of the declaration of restrictions. And here's the main difference. There's a power of sale. Okay, the Condominium Act has a power of sale. HOAs don't. All right. So if you don't pay your assessments, look out. They can sell it for out money to pay those assessments for you. Okay. That's the big deal. Now, there's a positive, negative to that. Positive is you can cover your assessments. Negative is it creates a mortgage or mortgagee relationship between that condo owner and that condominium association. So that brings in some regulatory trade statutes in the state. It kind of complicates that relationship a little bit. So, Mississippi HOA statutes. Does anybody remember, let's see, I think it was 2018? No, 2020. Ridgeway Lane. Sound familiar? Ridgeway Lane Management Partners. They were here in Flowood, probably about, I don't know, their offices were about 300 or 400 yards from here, actually. David Lane decided to embezzle some HOA funds, all right, to the tune of about $2.5 million. All right. Most of the associations were around here. What he was doing basically was he was commingling all the funds into one bank account, a community bank, and he was using it for personal use. You know, this is an age-old story. We hear it all the time. It's very unfortunate. He was convicted, got 41 months in prison. He's starting his out. But this caused our legislature to jump into action. Okay, let's fix this. It's a huge problem. Let's fix it. So they started passing statutes in Mississippi. And I know this is all kind of old news, but we're going to go back over it real quick. 7911, 751, the statutes that follow. Okay, they regulated the HOA management companies. They regulated the Ridgeway Lanes of the world. At the time, I think Ridgeway Lane was kind of tailing off. He was kind of getting out of the business, actually. I think he was down to about 20, 25 associations, maybe. But he nevertheless had a good bit of money that he took from him. Luckily, he didn't get it all. But these statutes all, you know, they all build on each other. But the first one, 7911, 753, the board must review financials for our meetings, okay? I know my management company, we dump about 150 pages of data on our board members every month, okay? They get copies of their invoice statement, check stub, electric bill, everything is dumped to them by email every month. Hopefully they look at it. They're required to, all right, by statute. That same statute allows Zoom meetings. This obviously was passed during COVID, 2020. Zoom meetings are allowed, but voting is not. Okay, electronic voting is not allowed. That's different. Electronic voting is different. Electronic voting requires validation, it requires historical accounts, okay? You can't have a Zoom meeting and tell everybody raise their hand if they're in favor. That doesn't work, all right? So electronic voting has got to be either by statute or by your governing documents, all right? So let's put that in our governing documents when we're drafting them later. 755, one board member can review the meeting documents, all right, prior to the meeting, okay? Usually the treasurer is who would like to do that. 757, $10,000 transfers require board approval. That's generally going to be between operating account and reserve account. Most neighborhood associations, community associations have both. Reserve accounts for deferred maintenance issues, operating accounts for every day. Any $10,000 or more transfer requires approval by the board on its minutes. 759, fidelity loan. The legislature decided that we're going to fix this altogether, never make it happen ever again. We're going to require all community associations to have a fidelity loan. Crime and theft. We all probably have it. Pay a lot of money for them. They're very expensive, right? If they even cover what you want them to cover. We found out that community associations simply could not afford it. Right? They were just too expensive. We went back to the legislature the following year, had it corrected. Now the board can waive that requirement, which is a good thing. A lot of boards do continue to maintain, especially if you're larger associations that have those $1 million budgets. They do continue to have them. 761, no liability for banks or HOA losses. That's just community bank and banking lobby got that squeezed in there. Good for them. Community bank, while they did nothing wrong, they did have some liability in the Ridgeway Lane incident, and so banking commission, banking lobby included in that law. And then finally, this is an older statute, 89169. This was 2011, and this was remittance transfer fees. What was happening there is developers, especially the college towns, is where this kind of came up. Developers were requiring transfer fees, sometimes of $10,000 for people who bought a lot in their neighborhood or bought a condo in their complex. You get into a real hot area that things are just going for ridiculous amounts of money, like we're seeing in some college towns now, and they can demand this. So it outlawed it. You can still pay transfer fees, but it's got to be prescribed in the governing documents. And it cannot be to the developer. It's got to be either to the HOA or the management company, one of the two. So that's pretty much HOA statutes and regulation. All right. We have case law now that kind of governs things here and there. And Santita asked me to kind of talk about what the big issues in Mississippi are. All right. So I kind of took to my own experience and talked to a few colleagues and some people in my offices. And we all unanimously agree. The number one issue is rentals, okay? By far, all right? People don't like them. Okay? People in HOAs just do not like rentals. I gotta admit, they cause problems. Like, rentals cause problems. I think rentals of anything cause problems. People just don't take care of stuff that's not theirs, I suppose. There's problems, and there's benefits to rentals, okay? First of all, rentals, in an HOA, the owner's still responsible, okay? It's not like they don't have to follow the rules because they're renting. The owner still holds responsible for the tenant. Recent survey by CAI. CAI is Community Associations Institute. It's where I'm getting a lot of my data. It's a trade group that we're a member of. They're amazing, and they are huge, okay? Their data capabilities are really breathtaking. But they asked communities from around the country to rank the problems that they have with rentals and investor-owned properties. And we also want to throw in BTRs with that, build-to-rents, which we're starting to see a lot more of. There's a new neighborhood going on right here in this jurisdiction. It's going to be a BTR neighborhood. We've seen in Florida, it's an entire neighborhood that is rentals. Okay, 400 houses that are part of the community association, and they're all rentals. Okay, interesting stuff. Okay, housing prices are kind of driving this stuff. 73% said the tenants were not familiar with the governing documents, did not follow them, and failed to maintain the home. Done. Okay, we knew that was going to be the case. That is really a lack of the owner educating their tenant, but nevertheless, they must follow the rules, and you must enforce the rules against the tenant as if they are an owner. Benefits. This is some of the things that people don't think of. In a down economy, rentals serve a definite purpose. Okay? We all saw this, some of you are too young, but a lot of us saw this in 2008, 9, 10, 11. Investors may be the only buyers. Okay? When you have a recession and things start going the wrong direction and housing is not just flying off the market like it is right now, inventories go up, there's no buyers. Right? Investors come in and start buying. Occupancy of homes that would otherwise be vacant. 100% of the time, occupied homes better than a vacant home. 100% of the time. Right? Vacant homes are terrible. Right? And avoids foreclosure. We saw this back in 2010 also. People that were going into foreclosure were able to rent their home, go to a cheaper alternative, and avoid foreclosure and come back later on. There's a lot of that going on. So rentals do serve a purpose. Short-term rentals. VRBOs, Airbnbs, a whole other animal. It's kind of new. I mean, I know they've been around I know I've been Verboing for probably 10 years, but they've been around for a while, but they really have started rearing their ugly head here recently. Short-term rentals are obviously transient hotel-type situations. We're seeing a lot of it in college towns, Oxford, Hattiesburg, Starkville. People are buying rentals left and right. Sometimes you can get more on a game day in Oxford than your whole expenses for the year. Okay, if it's a big game like LSU or something. It's just an attractive thing in those college towns. Beach areas, with all of them that's been around for a while. Recreational venues such as lakes. Okay, a new one that I read about a couple of weeks ago, Augusta. The Masters happened last week. Just about every house in Augusta is now VRBO. There's not like 40,000 people live in town, and every house is rented. Right, during the Masters. It's transient guests in and out, okay? They're on vacation. These people are there on vacation. They're there to party, have a great time, sit outside, grill out, cook out. They're not worried about safety. They're not worried about neighbors. They're not worried about the things that community associations are generally concerned about. That creates issues. Housing shortages. If everybody's, I think we're seeing that in Oxford right now. I see a few of you in the Oxford area. It's difficult to find a place in Oxford now because VRBOs and Airbnbs are grabbing them up because they can get $2,000 a weekend or a night or whatever they do. I got a client in Starkville and I have a client in Oxford, and oddly enough, they want to allow short-term rentals, but they don't want to allow long-term rentals. All right, which is what we put into the covenants. They don't want long-term rentals because they don't want students. Students are problems, I guess. I don't know. They want the transient guests that come in and that are gone. And I guess more than that, they want to be able to rent their properties for more amounts of money. So you're seeing it both ways. You're seeing some people in favor of VRBOs, some people are not. And I know y'all seen that commercial. That's hilarious. Nick Saban is great. All right, we're going to go through a couple of cases here, talk about rentals, and then we'll move on to a few other problems. Should be going quicker than this. Ken Crook, the guy in Madison. This is 2010, going back a little bit. The city of Madison passed this rental ordinance that required inspections upon rental. It required a bond requirement, required a permit. Anyway, Ken Crook decided he didn't want to do it, so they prosecuted him in criminal court. It went all the way to our Supreme Court. It was reversed by our Supreme Court, really because of due process problems, not because of regulation. Madison went back and corrected the regulation. It is in place now. It's been in place ever since. It's very difficult to rent a house in Madison. We've got to jump a lot of hurdles, and it costs a good bit of money. But the result of that was the city of Madison started promoting their neighborhoods to prohibit rentals. So North Bay jumped up to North Bay actually had a city alderman that was living there at the time. He jumped up to the plate and said, "We'll do it." So, facts here real quick is HOA board enacted a policy on their own. 5-member board said, "You know what? No more rentals in the neighborhood. They're gone." Covenants, which did not disallow rentals, they didn't specifically allow them, but it did not disallow them, required a 75% vote to amend the covenants, 51% to amend those bylaws that were probably created the week before. Kept-Parks rented their home, and the HOA immediately sued. All right. The ruling: Chancery Court ruled in favor of the HOA. No surprise here. Holding the resolution was valid and enforceable. Court of Appeals reversed and rendered in favor of the Kept-Parks, saying the board had the power to enact rules and regulations. That's important. Rules and regulations are huge. Okay, we need those things. Okay. But they did not have the ability to involve rights that were reserved to the landowners. Right to amend the bylaws, right to amend the covenants was reserved to the membership. They should have put it to a vote of the membership. Editor's note here: board should have put it to a vote, which they eventually did. Right after this case was reversed, it passed overwhelmingly to prohibit rentals in North Bay, so we're right back where we started after a ton of calls. But, note, government documents prevailed. Okay, governing documents prevailed. It's really nationwide, right? Across the nation, that's just the general consensus of the courts. Lake Serene. This Lake Serene, Harrisburg, Mississippi. I know many of you are familiar with it. Beautiful lake down there on Highway 98. This was a 2022 case. Covenants did not prohibit renting. Covenants did limit the use of property for residential purposes and not business purposes. HOA, well, Espin started in their property on Airbnb and VRBO. HOA passed a resolution prohibiting rentals less than 180 days. No more Airbnb, all right? They sued Espin for violating the ruling, the resolution that they passed. Chancery Court ruled in favor of Espin on all counts. We went up to the Supremes. Residential purposes is not defined in the covenants. Okay? That provision, residential and commercial or business purposes, we see in just about every set of covenants. Okay, must be used for residential purposes. The court ended up having to go to Alabama, Missouri, Florida, Texas to determine the meaning of residential. All right. They determined that. What it also found the resolution was unauthorized as this right was vested in the landowners. They relied on North Bay in ruling in that favor. But they also determined that the use was residential. It was, in fact, residential. In other words, they're not using it as a business. It's not a storefront. You don't have customers coming and going. There's people living there, albeit maybe for a couple of days. There's people living there which established the residency part. Buena Vista, 2024 Court of Appeals case. Buena Vista, DeSoto County, 400 homes. They held a meeting to change the bylaws and prohibit leasing of homes. I kind of get to a common thing here if you're following. Bylaws require a 2/3 vote to amend. Again, those crazy bylaws. It passed with 138 of the 206 people at the meeting. They had a special meeting, 206 people show up, 138 vote to do it. They say, hey, it's passed. No more rental. Jones sued immediately saying that the 2/3 vote was calculated incorrectly. Chancery Court, 2/3 vote was in fact incorrectly tallied. It required a 2/3 vote basically of the membership, not just those that were present at the meeting. Also found that the bylaws were ambiguous and invalid for public policy reasons. The Court of Appeals remanded, saying that the bylaws state that in all meetings of the members, 25% of the votes eligible to be cast shall constitute a quorum. Right? Not to pass an amendment, a quorum. And the majority of those members present shall decide any questions at all meetings except on the question of amending the bylaws, which requires a 2/3 vote. Period. Didn't say 2/3 vote of the membership, it just said 2/3 vote. Court stated the requirement of 2/3 vote of the membership is just not there. It's just not stated. All right? The governing documents did not say that. They just said 2/3 vote. So it's 2/3 vote of the people in the meeting. Passed. Okay? Governing documents correct. Every time the governing documents correct. Unless they're unreasonable or ambiguous. So how do we restrict? How do we restrict in Mississippi? How do we restrict renting, for instance? Change covenants. That's the easy way, but not the easy way. That's the best way. Change of covenants typically requires a vote of membership. I'll tell you right now, restricting property is not very popular, folks. I mean, I just underwent this with a neighborhood in our area here. It was a large neighborhood, 400 plus houses. They decided they were going to prohibit renting. It failed miserably. Okay? People just generally don't want to restrict their property. If they don't want to rent it, they want to be able to not rent it themselves. They want somebody to tell them they can't rent it. I think a lot of people remember 2008, 9/10. Rules and regulations. I mentioned that a minute ago. Associations need the flexibility to adopt rules and regulations. Remember, they're your elected body. Okay? They're supposed to be doing what you're supposed to do. Board may have rulemaking authority. Rules such as reviewing the leases, requiring a lease addendum. I have a lot of neighborhoods that do that. They require a lease addendum signed by the tenants saying that they have been given a set of the rules and covenants and they understand them and they agree to abide by them. Require a fee. Or a minimum term, a fee, a lease review fee is what we call it. It's got to be reasonable. Okay, it can't be. I got a neighborhood right now they want to pass a $5,000 lease review fee. Okay, the assessments I think are $350 a year. Like, I would say that's probably unreasonable. That's going to get kicked back so quick it's going to make their heads spin. I had another one do $2,500. they changed the meeting. I mean, they started getting threats and lawsuits from every which direction. Board approval to lease, typically that's something we try to do. You know, it's all, the focus is to discourage leasing. That's what you're trying to do. More current issues besides rent. Okay, it's called the 3 Ps of HOA living. This is not just in Mississippi, this is nationwide. I hear this in a lot of conferences I go to, 3 Ps. Number 1, pets. Right? Pets. We get so many calls about pets. It's crazy. Barking dogs are the number 1 problem. All right? People let their dogs out at night, they bark. What we're dealing with here is legal nuisance, okay? Public nuisance versus private nuisance. Neighbor to neighbor, private. Neighbor to neighborhood, public, okay? That's when the association can certainly get involved. Unleash dangerous dogs. You know, fortunately, this is not a gigantic problem, but people do let their dogs out. This past year, we had an 8-year-old man walking with a cane walking down the street. 2 dangerous dogs got loose in the backyard, and he couldn't run. If the neighbor had not had a gun, did not kill the dogs, but if he had not had a gun, that poor gentleman would have been dead. He was severely injured. This poop, okay, poop, huge issue. We get this call a lot. This is an actual letter from a lawyer. And y'all, a lot of you know him, I know him. He was obviously frustrated, and I appreciate it. I know y'all can all read that letter. He threatened injunctive relief with another dog pooping in the yard. He was going to file suit against the association. He was extremely angered, and unfortunately, his letter did not have the blue mark out over the defecation of his lawn, so we were able to experience the full breadth of it. But we get this call a lot, dude. Of course, this is neighborly stuff. Okay, we're talking about neighborly stuff to do. You just don't do that, do you? Parking, second P. Parking in the street, parking in the yard. These are actual pictures I took out. I mean, this is you don't want the 18-wheeler in the front yard next to you. Okay, that's just not something you want. And I got stories of my stories. I got track hoses in the backyard. I got snow cones trucks in somebody's front yard. Of course, people put 53-foot motor homes in their front yard, parking there for weeks. Boats. Everything's okay if it's a 4-wheeler, but you don't want a funnel cake truck, you know, right there next to you. Public streets are local authorities. Okay, typically, the streets are dedicated to the local jurisdiction, the development's done. Call the police, all right? However, covenants are contractual. They're contractual. You don't sign the covenants, but you sign into that neighborhood when you buy that deed. So they can be more restrictive than ordinances. Covenants can disallow parking in the streets. A lot of them do. A lot of them allow parking for 24 hours, and that's it. So the board wants to tow it. All right, we've done a lot of towing in the past. Yard parking, same thing. There by the picture below, they take buildings. What I recommend is establishing some very concise towing regulations. Okay, put some rules in place that specifically give them an idea of what they can and can't do. Reasonable and sufficient notice. Reasonable and notice. Those are the 2 things that I say constantly. Sometimes I wake myself up at night saying, any rule has got to be reasonable, and you got to give everybody notice. Okay, notice. Before you tow a vehicle in a neighborhood, you got to notify them. Give them a chance to correct it. Okay, and that goes for just about everything. Pools, the next P. All right, pools are a lot of problems. Okay, a whole multitude of problems. That's not a neighborhood pool at the top right corner, but that is a very busy pool that I witnessed at one time. But noise, if you live next to a pool, pools generally close at 10 o'clock at night. There's all kinds of children playing, adults playing loud music, unsupervised children being dropped off. This happens a lot. Parents just drop them off and go do their thing, I guess. After hours use, kids are going to be kids. They're going to climb the fence. They're going to get in the pool. They're going to do what they do. They're going to trash it. They're going to. It's an issue. Improper attire of adults. Okay, and I know what y'all are probably all thinking here. It's not that. Okay, a lot of times it's. Well, I'll give you an example. We had a. I'd say probably late '60s gentleman. Okay, who was wearing a leopard print Speedo to the community pool. He was not in great physical condition. Right? We should leave it at that. But, very awkward situations for awkward situations with mothers and their children trying to swim at the pool. It was scaring the kids, scaring the mothers. Nobody wanted to go to the pool. It was even more awkward conversation for us to have with that gentleman. Okay? Luckily, he did clothe himself in a more appropriate manner. Comprehensive posted set of rules, absolute necessity. Okay? Comprehensive. I've been working on pool rules for the better part of my career. They got to be comprehensive. You got to think of everything. Okay? Not only for liability reasons, but for enforcement reasons. A lot of times, the local police, the local sheriff's department will help you enforce as long as it's published on the fence. People have received, what's that word? Notice. Honorable mention, a few things to mention. ARC, architectural review, changes to property. People got to get permission, okay? In the last couple of months, I don't see my colleague here. In the last couple of months, we actually had a request for somebody to bury their dad in the backyard. Okay? This is not allowed. Okay? This is not allowed in the law. Okay? This would be an architectural change that you would want people to get permission for. You don't want a pink door. You don't want, a green roof. There's things that you don't want. However, I do want to mention that times change. So leave some flexibility there. You want the board to be able to change architectural requirements as it goes on. Yard maintenance, huge. Signs and flags, get this call all the time. We don't want that sign in our yard. We don't like that school. We don't like that religion, whatever it may be. This is First Amendment, okay, versus commercial speech, vulgar speech. We all learn this in law school. Okay? You can regulate size, color, location, duration. There's a lot of things you can regulate when it comes to signage and speech. But the content is generally not one of them, okay? You cannot just allow the 6 state flags. Okay, you can't do it. Garbage cans, goes without saying, play equipment, trampolines, basketball goals on the street. Marijuana, this is something new. Golly, people smoking marijuana in their backyard. I don't know if y'all noticed that stuff just flies through the air, but you can smell it 5 streets over. A lot of complaints about that. How to address these violations? Fines. Very effective. Board needs authority to impose fines. Okay, remember, you're talking about a board that's made up of members of the community. Very effective tool. It doesn't matter if the fine is $10 or $1,000. It really doesn't matter, okay? In our company, we kind of use the old soccer days, yellow card, red card, fine. Yellow card, red card, you're out. Works like a charm, okay? People